Let's talk about the COVID inquiry, the ongoing independent inquiry, which assesses the way that the UK responded to the pandemic. Chairman Baroness Hallett has been accused of excluding groups likely to challenge the government's decision during the pandemic. So let's speak to Molly Kingsley now, the co-founder of UsForThem, a parent campaign group which challenged lockdown measures. Morning, Molly. Lovely to see you.
Morning, Bev.
So just give our listeners and our viewers an outline of this inquiry, what it aims to do, who it has been set up by, and what we should expect from it as members of this country.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the inquiry is a government-led inquiry. The total cost is likely to be over £100 million, so significant. And as you'd expect, ostensibly, the purpose of the inquiry is to examine the government's COVID response and to learn lessons going forward. And the way it's been set up, it will be broken down into different modules. So we've had so far Module 1, and we're now into Module 2. And the reason that it's hit the news over the last week or so, and I agree that actually there hasn't been much about it at all in the news, but there has been a little bit about this story about potential bias. And the reason that's happened now is because Module 2 is really the core module of the inquiry. Module 2 is about high-level political decision-making. So it is really crucial that the right people are involved at this point in Module 2 to ensure that appropriate, rigorous challenge can be put to the witnesses in Module 2. And those witnesses, we expect, will include the key government ministers responsible for pandemic policy. So that's kind of where we are. And I think the concern with it is that if you look at who the key participants, so the inquiry invites core participants, you can also apply for that status. And if you look at the list of core participants to Module 2, and these are really the people who will be driving the questions for the inquiry, they are the people who will be, suggesting the lines of challenge. They look very heavily skewed towards individuals and organisations who have some kind of pro-lockdown position to advocate.
OK, so for instance, bereaved family members of those who died from COVID, understandably, have a right to contribute to this inquiry. And yet what you're saying is that there need to be people who actually have a good case to make that the lockdown measures were too extreme and were never proportionate. Do we know who, Molly, might be taking that position in their conversations with Baroness Hallett?
No, I mean, it's really not clear. And I think this is one of the concerns. It's really not clear who might be taking the challenging position. Yeah. So it's very clear when you look at the list, and we did some analysis on it, actually. So there's a list, I think it's about 30 core participants for Module 2. Now, we plotted it out on a graph, which of those might be in favour of lockdown, which would be kind of neutral. So, statistics authorities and things like that, we can assume might be neutral. And who might be, as you've said, challenging this lockdown status quo and orthodoxy, because it was an orthodoxy during the pandemic. And there's very few. And, from a very rough count, we counted about 20 pro-lockdown individuals and organisations. So, you've mentioned the families who were bereaved by COVID. Of course, it's entirely appropriate that they are there. But you don't have anyone on the other side. So, given that we know excess deaths now are higher than they were for the equivalent period during COVID, non-COVID excess deaths now, you would really expect there to be someone representing all the individuals who have lost family members due to the lockdown response. And actually, a good example is we know that a group representing the vaccine injured did apply for core participant status, and they were rejected. Now, many of us would say, well, you would expect them to have been included. There needs to be balance. Likewise, the TUC are involved. Presumably their position is a more pro-lockdowny one. And there's no one representing industry, the whole of industry or business. There's no, obviously we came into this from a children and an education point of view. A very, very notable absence in the core participant list is Department for Education. So there's a whole load 14, I think, government departments included as core participants in Module 2, no department for education, and they're not in Module 1 either. So who is going to be putting the really rigorous challenge about, schools? Why were previous pandemic plans discarded in the way they were? So no, it's not. I wish I could say it's easy to see who's going to provide that challenge, but it's not easy at all to see. And this is a real concern.
So there's this group of, I think, about 21 MPs, including Lord Frost, GB News presenter Esther McVeigh and Sir Graham Brady. They've written this letter expressing their concerns. Do you think they'll be listened to, Molly? Is there any way to break through what appears to be a locked down, forgive the word, but a locked down echo chamber of people who just wish to tell Baroness Hallett that next time, and there will be another pandemic, we have to lock down sooner, harder, close schools earlier, have more mandates? Is anybody going to break through, do you think? Is there any cause for optimism?
Well, I really hope so. I mean, look, it's great that this letter has been sent, and it's great that it does seem to have woken people up a little bit to the fact that, this is happening, and it's happening now, because I agree it's very odd that there's been less live coverage of it, actually. And it's great you guys are doing this, because you would expected there to have been more. Now, this is going to be going on, certainly for the next year. There will be other modules. And, to be fair to Baroness Hallett, it is possible that the approach she is taking is to keep the core participants very narrow for this module and to introduce other voices later. If that's the case, you would hope that key decision makers, so, Hancock, Johnson, etc., you would hope that they will be called back as witnesses for later modules. That obviously doesn't work if actually they're only going to be called as witnesses in this key political module. So I think the hope must be that this group of peers and politicians keep up the pressure at every module. And actually, if there are concerns that the right questions have not been asked at this module, they need to be asked later. Because
Absolutely.
Actually, it's a waste of money. It's going to waste £100 million otherwise, but it's going to set a disastrous precedent.
It does set a disastrous precedent. And I think, Molly, all that any of us have ever wanted is a fair and open debate about this, and the frustrations that will be felt if we don't get that will be immense. Molly Kingsley there, co-founder of UsForThem. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let me know what you think. GBviews@gbnews.uk.